Hello there, Safehouse.
What's up, Safehouse?
Another week.
I can't believe it's already another week.
Another week and another episode.
Oh man, we are like winding down on our access, man.
Winding down on Access. We've had 9 episodes.
Yeah.
This will be our 9th episode on Access.
I
We
know.
talked a lot about Access. We've learned a lot.
We like a sitcom or something. What do you think? We a sitcom or a drama? I don't know. It depends.
It's like a comedy
Sometimes
drama.
relationships are like that.
And sometimes it's a variety show.
Right. I think we just kind of summed up our whole marriage.
Sometimes it's a magic show.
Right.
Sometimes it's a circus.
Right. That's real talk right there. If y'all want to know what a relationship is, it's all of that. It is all of that.
All of that.
We try not to be like them ratchet, like reality shows. No, we really do. Try
Not completely, but if you watch the last couple, they kind of got kind of close.
Right, that is true.
We'll try to avoid that. We'll try to have classic content.
Man.
All right, family, remember to like the video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button for notifications on when we publish content. Get to know us. Give us some comments in the comments below. We got a few comments offline about the topic.
Yeah.
We're discussing more about conflict, and specifically, we're going to dig into how people resolve conflict. Now, we don't have every answer on conflict resolution, but we're going to share a few examples or at least some frameworks on how people choose to resolve conflict. Some of these are positive, some of these are not so positive, but we want you throughout this episode to kind of challenge yourself, to kind of see how conflict resolution shows up.
Right. It's funny. We were getting ready to have a conflict before this thing started.
Just right before this, right before
we
the
were.
video.
He was like, "Well, what you mean?" I'm like, "Oh."
Y'all just don't know what go down before we hit the record button.
We was about to have a whole conflict. I used the word that I shouldn't ever use. You always. That's that exaggeration word we kind of talked about the last time. He was like, "Well, what? Always?" I was like, "Yeah, we were about to have a conflict."
Absolutes.
Yeah.
Whenever you describe something in absolutes, it can be that can be fuel for conflict. You always do this.
Especially with this guy.
Right. Or you never do this. It's like, okay, I always do that.
I do. Yeah, you always
Or
do
you
that.
never? I never?
He hates it when I use absolutes. He does.
Absolutes. Yeah. Because there's no room for, what happens is you miss the change. It's like, so to say somebody always does something.
That's true.
It's just like you never leave room for change, improvement, and basically you're saying whatever little improvement you made, I don't recognize it because you always still.
That is true. So that was what our conflict was about to be about before we turned these cameras on.
Right. But we resolved it.
We resolved it very quickly. I feel like the older we are now, that we get to conflict, we resolve conflict a lot quicker than what we used to.
Yeah, and because none of it's personal, right?
Yeah, that is true.
It's just, okay, you chalk things up. When you've been married for 30 plus years, you chalk things up to misunderstanding versus malice.
Yeah.
That
is true.
It's like, wait a minute, when you first get married, you're like, wow, this person must not like me, or they think I'm this, or they think I'm that. When you go a few years, you're like, okay, I don't think they intended that. I think it just came out wrong, or they have a perspective, right? Versus just sort of throwing them in the bucket of they trying to do me wrong.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. That is true because, even you saying that, I feel like that can lead us into one of the paths of a resolution that some people go to. It's that battle of wills.
Yeah.
And when you have a battle of wills, you really do take it personal.
Yeah.
It's all personal.
Yeah. Battle of wills is really interesting too because it's not about resolving anything.
Absolutely.
It's about my will dominating your will, or my point of view dominating your point of view, right? It's really about somebody coming out on top, somebody winning and somebody losing.
Right.
Which, unfortunately, in situations of winning and losing, it doesn't leave room for my right doesn't mean that you're wrong, right? Or my point of view doesn't have to come at the sacrifice of your point of view being wrong, right?
But it's funny because when you have a battle of wills, I feel like I'm always right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it like you said, there is no room for that because I feel like I'm right, you feel like you're right, or, everybody's right. And so now it's the person who like you said, the person who's the strongest or who prove, or to me, it's like a boxing match.
It is.
And it's not like the TKO. It's not like the technical. I mean, somebody like literally like just gets
demolished.
Yeah. And you're like, okay.
And it's kind of like a video game. It's like Mortal Kombat, right? I pull out my finishing move.
I know.
Finish him.
Right. I know. That is true.
It is. And
because words will finish people.
Words will finish people. We pull out all kinds of moves.
We do.
I either toss a fireball at you or do a high kick, a spinning kick. Yeah, it is because and those types of battles of wills and those moves, like a video game, show up as different ways, right? So if you're a spiritual person, I'm gonna pull out biblical stuff, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna spiritualize you to the point. If you're a logical person, I'm gonna logic and reason.
That was me.
You.
I can admit that. I was like the spiritual person, to be like, and now that I'm older, I understand that was manipulation and probably shouldn't have been doing all of that. But once again, like you said, I felt like that was my strongest weapon. And so I felt like I could use that. And once again, I was using it against you versus trying to make sure that we were actually getting some real resolution on conflicts.
Right. That was our finishing move, the Bible thumper.
It was.
She'd take the Bible and wow.
I would.
Right?
I would. I mean,
fatality.
Right. Listen, I just got to be honest. Like I said, I have matured. I've definitely gotten better. But when we first started this thing, that was all I knew because I felt like once again that was my sword.
Yeah. My combat tools was logic. You keep hitting this.
Sorry. We talked about that beforehand too.
Got nervous hands. My combat tools is logic and reasoning and data and information and I've been gifted with a little bit deeper voice, right? So I can speak pretty forcefully and authoritatively, right? And so, once again, your finishing move was the Bible thumper, and mine was just like, you have no information, right? It's like you have no data to back up your point of view, right?
But the Bible is true.
I guess my move was the dunce cap. I take that big pointy hat and put it on your head.
Right. And I will walk away from like, he right. I don't know nothing. Maybe he do have a point.
Yeah, but once again, it's manipulation, right? It is just a form of winning, a form of getting your point across, a form of feeling like you're superior. And at some point, the conflict just goes beyond resolving the conflict. Now, you just focused on demolishing the other person, right? Demolishing their point of view. Some conflicts, and this is another battles of wills issue, is like you're not even really conflicting about that thing. We're using this as a mechanism.
Not at that point anymore.
Yeah. We're using this as a mechanism to resolve a bunch of other unresolved conflict. Right. Well, you said this just like you said the last time we had this, because you always, I start using absolutes.
Yeah.
You always, when you get into this mode, you start so and then the next thing you know, we're arguing about 5 arguments ago, or we're having conflict about 5 conflicts ago. Right.
And where that gets tricky is when you're dating.
Yeah.
When you're dating, and that's your path to resolution is you feel like I just always got to be right because sometimes when you feel like you always got to be right, then you're gonna be alone.
You are. Right.
You're like, why don't I have nobody? Because you haven't figured out yet how to have conflict with people and not
try to
want
win.
to demolish them all the time. And they're like, I don't have time for that, because once again, you always going to have conflict. But if you're the person who always feels like you got to win, you got to say stuff, you willing to say anything or whatever, then like you said, you keep sitting back wondering like, why can't I find somebody? Part of it is, I think you just have to step back and be like, maybe part of it is it's my conflict resolution.
Yeah,
maybe I don't know how to do that.
A lot of people don't.
Yeah.
And
they don't teach that.
They don't teach that. Unfortunately, we get a lot of bad examples of resolving conflict. I know I didn't get great examples of my parents growing up. I don't
me
think
either. I never saw my parents have conflict.
I saw my parents have conflict, but it wasn't the healthiest, right? And we see conflict in various contexts. I have to credit one person in my life, and that's Dr. Michael Reynolds. We used to be in a motorcycle club together. And I just so happened to be a witness to a conflict with him and First Lady after we had traveled one night. And, I walked in the room and I walked out. He said, no, you don't have to sit down. He said, I want you to understand what it's like to work through conflict and still love your wife.
Yeah.
So
That's good.
he allowed me to sit there and sort of listen to what's going on, and he resolved it, right? It was masterful the way, they went through the whole arc. And so it taught me that it's not always about winning, right? Because it's not like he just asserted his whole masculinity in that situation. There were a lot of things he had to concede to, a lot of things he had to admit, but then get into a place of peaceful resolution where they can have conversation about the problem. It was just a great lesson.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, you almost need a class on that.
Yeah, you do.
Because, like I said, a master class, because a lot of us are still kind of struggling in that area.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because, we witness conflict in many different circles, and unfortunately, the world's view on conflict is winning. Right, just like in negotiation, the world's view is that you have to get everything you need to get out of it, and the world's view also is that we're kind of like that personality type we talked about. We got to teach the other person something.
Yeah.
It's our responsibility. Well, you always get your way, so I got to show you that you don't always get your way in this lesson, right? And God doesn't call us to be teachers in every situation,
That is true.
and especially when we're trying to resolve a conflict. So Battle of Wills is one.
Yeah.
What's another sort of conflict resolution approach? And once again, we want to preface this with these aren't necessarily positive. We're not advocating these. We're just saying these are ways that people choose to resolve conflict. What we'd like you to do in the comments below is tell us about what you see showing up. And do you think it's positive or negative in the way you resolve conflict? And after this episode, do you think there are ways that you start to address conflict differently that may create a little bit more positive an outcome when you have conflict? Because let's be real, you're gonna have conflict.
You're going to have,
You're gonna have
you're
conflict.
going to have it. There's no way around it.
Yeah, whether you're on the dating path and you finally get to that first holiday and you got to try to figure out which house you're going to show up to, right? Or when you're with your forever person and now we're trying to figure out how to build a budget. Yeah.
So some people just avoid conflict.
Yeah.
And let me say this too about conflict. Conflict doesn't always have to be an argument.
Right.
Because people say, well, we never argue, but you never use the word that we never have conflict either. You can almost kind of make it seem like you never have to work through stuff. But some people just avoid stuff. I like keeping the peace. So there are some spaces where I'm like, okay, I'll just avoid it. I'm like, you know what? I don't even feel like it today.
Right.
This one is not even worth it. And I don't even, and I'm not even saying doing that just in marriage. I mean, just with people.
Yeah.
And I could do that at work. I'm like, you know what? It's not even worth it.
As they say, the juice ain't worth the squeeze.
Yeah, it's not. I'm like,
the juice ain't worth the squeeze.
Heck, we good? Yeah, we good.
Yeah. Well, that's one kind of avoidance. And in other cases, people just, avoid it altogether. And it's just they know it's going to turn into something and they sort of sidestep it. The problem with certain types of avoidance, because there's a type of avoidance that's not so bad, and that's being accommodating for certain types of
that is true.
conflicts.
That is true. We're going to talk about that.
Right, but avoiding a conflict just for the sake of avoiding the negativity of the conflict means the conflict is still there. You've just sidestepped it for now.
Yeah.
And the emotions around it, the situation around it, the way you feel about it, even though you may be able to deal with it now, it may get to a point where you're not able to deal with it in the future. And now what was a small conflict now becomes a big unresolvable issue.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say too. That's the problem with avoidance, is that when you avoid it, it's not like you're solving it. And so what you do is you just kind of put all that on the back burner. And then what it happens is what was, small now is this gigantic thing. And you know how you always say to me, you're like kind of like what we said before, like, what are we really arguing about?
Right.
Because what happens is when you've avoided conflict long enough, when we're actually arguing about one point, now I'm like, bringing out my receipts.
You got your receipts and your list.
From everything else that we ever talked about. And you're like, we're not even on that today. Where did all of that come from?
Well, that's all the conflict I avoided. But now that you're bringing this to me, I'm going to bring out my list.
Because that's what we want to do too. Oh, now you want to talk about what I'm doing?
Yeah,
well, let's talk about what you're doing. I've done that before too. I guess I'm just telling on myself today. I'm like, man, because, I used to feel like, man, I'm not even saying nothing. And Andre would call me on the carpet about everything. I'm like, why are you gotta. I'm like, I want to be like that. I want to be that person, instead of, because see, in my mind, I'm thinking I'm keeping the peace.
No, yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
Only, yeah, not even for yourself.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Because it's still not peaceful. I
Right.
mean, you just sidestepped it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So now it's
Like I said, I've gotten better.
She's gotten better. She's
I've
gotten
gotten
better. And the other thing I had to learn is just not to make issue of everything, right? It's just like, wait a minute. Once again, the juice ain't worth the squeeze. It ain't that I'm I'm avoiding conflict. It's just this is not conflict worthy.
Yeah.
There's certain things that are not conflict worthy, and it's just like Can you just not be right for a second? Because sometimes we get into conflict just for the sake of being right.
That is true.
There's nothing at stake. There's no risk. There's no nothing.
That is
I
true.
just need to be right in this moment. And it's just like, okay, now you're right. What's after that? Now, now we both mad. Everybody's frustrated. You're humiliated.
Yeah.
I'm huffed up. And it's gotten no forward progress.
Right. Because the conflict is still there.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed.
So how about when we accommodate each other? What does accommodating each other in conflict look like?
I feel like when you accommodate somebody, it's me saying, okay, this time I'm not going to make it about me. I'm going to make it about you. I think where that, and I like that as a conflict resolution path. I think where it becomes an issue is when the person who is accommodating now begins to feel like they do it all the time.
Right. Or do a false accommodation, right?
That's
And
true, too.
A false accommodation because, me accommodating you, because I often describe this when I'm talking to other men about investing in their wives, right? Or investing in their relationship. So it's accommodation. I'd rather use the word investment. It's an investment if you want to go to dinner theater, right? And I may not want to go to dinner theater that night, but I say, hey, no, let's go to dinner theater. Let's go out. Let's hang out together. Let's do this, whatever. Even though this is not something I would normally choose, I do this and I accommodate that, right? So there's no conflict there, right? Versus, okay, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to dinner theater with her. I'm going there. My face look like I'm sucking on lemons. I'm
Right.
dissatisfied. The whole. I'm
And
not.
then I wish you hadn't came.
Right. It's a false accommodation.
Yeah.
Right. I haven't really accommodated, or I hold it against you. It's like, oh, you remember when I went to that dinner theater? I didn't want to do that. It's like, well, wait, I didn't know you didn't want to go.
Right.
You seemed happy at the time. It was a false accommodation. 'Cause I
Right.
didn't really accommodate.
Right.
I kind of gave in, but I'm still frustrated about
Yeah.
it.
That is true. That is true. Do you feel like you've done that with me?
In the first part of our marriage, maybe. Now, I don't view it as that kind of false accommodation. Now it's more investment. It's more, and one thing, it's like I know you like to do things together. And even though I wouldn't choose all the time to do it that way, I'm not frustrated by it. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, let's do this together. Let's go over to this place together. Let's go do this together. There have been times it's like, okay, I don't have, I know we don't have to do things together. It's like, no, let's go anyway. Let's go do this and we'll go do this together. And, because once again, it's, I get pleasure out of knowing that you like that.
Yeah. No,
and
that's true.
so,
And I feel the same way about you. Like I said,
Yeah.
I may not like all of your hobbies. I tried golf, but it didn't work for me.
Right, right.
But he wanted me to try it to see if I liked it. So I was like, okay, cool. Like I said, it just wasn't my thing. I think that works for couples.
Yeah.
Like I said, at least give it a try.
Right.
Nobody's saying that you have to like it, or love it. And then be able to say, well, you know what? That's still just really not my thing.
Right.
I'm just going to leave that one to you.
which is cool.
Yeah.
Which is cool. And you see a lot of conflict because there's this false notion that we need to enjoy everything. We need to enjoy each other's everything all the time.
Because we didn't talk about that part, like in that part of access. But like I just want my private stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a big thing with couples.
Yeah, yeah.
Nothing should be private and everything should be, it's our stuff. And, but some stuff, like you said, is just mine.
Yeah, we talked about, I think we did talk a little bit about privacy and secrets.
Yeah.
And, there's certain things that there's still individuality. There's a certain sense of individuality, even though we're one,
Yeah.
right? Even though we're one as a couple, there's certain things that are part of your identity, my identity. There may be certain things you like, 5 a.m. prayer. I like to go to the range. I like to do various other things. It doesn't necessarily mean that because we don't participate in those things with each other that we're still not one, right? That's
Yeah.
part of your identity. And I think couples get caught up in this sort of picturesque ideal of what togetherness in a relationship looks like, to the point where one's frustrated because we don't look like this.
Right.
You know?
Or even the secret piece, because I felt like I said, we just kind of dealt with that piece ourselves. Somebody had done something really nice for us, but the person was like, don't tell your wife
Yeah.
who did it.
Yeah.
Everything in me I was like, okay, let me not make this a conflict. Like, because I want to know who did it, and why would they even say, like, don't tell her. So I had to really fight to not to make that a conflict. So it wasn't like I wasn't avoiding it. I did feel like I accommodated that, because accommodation too is also respect.
Yeah.
So I had to respect that the person who was helping us didn't want me to know. So I wasn't going to put you in a position where you felt like now you had to break that person's confidence because I was feeling a certain kind of way. Because sometimes that can be a conflict in marriages. Well, I can't believe you're not going to tell me. Well, that's an accommodation in that moment.
It is. And once again, is to the point earlier, is it conflict worthy, right? Because
exactly.
the person had done something extremely nice.
Yeah.
We were the benefactors of that.
Yeah.
Right? We got the benefit from it. The only thing is you don't know who.
Exactly. I still kind of want to know, but I just, just saying. But, it's not something we...
Yeah. So, and even once it's like, what better or worse would we be? Right.
You're right.
We would be in no different situation.
Right.
So, it's one of those things, though, that we have to sort of keep ourselves in check on that kind of thing. But, it can happen.
Yeah. I think accommodation is, like you said, you can accommodation and compromise are, like I said, they're different. But I do feel like in that accommodation place and in compromise, you find some middle ground.
Yeah. So compromise is kind of like the win-win. When I went to Karis School of sort of negotiation as part of my executive development. And they said the goal of any negotiation is for everybody to feel like they've won a little something, and then everybody feels like they gave up a little bit of something, right? But the majority is everybody win to some degree, right? And you look at compromise as a way to say, okay, how do we both walk away feeling like we've gotten something out of this? Now, one could say that's kind of a selfish view of a relationship, right? Because now we're walking away trying to see how much of our way can get inserted into the resolution, right? Rather than, I guess, a puristic or altruistic view is what's the best resolution for us, regardless of how I feel, right?
But it's hard to not put your feelings.
It is. It's that once again. That's why I say it's altruistic, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of utopian that we can come up with this grand sort of thing.
Yeah, because how do I negotiate my feelings?
Yeah, you don't. You just feel that. We all just feel this is the right way to do something, right? For whatever reason, whether it's the way we were trained, or it's what our parents taught us, or we've had positive experiences with that approach before. We feel very strongly that this is the right way to approach a given thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, this is just for the married folk. But I do feel like when married couples come to a good compromise, there's some good rewards on us.
Yeah, there is.
There are some,
There is,
called makeup,
Yeah, the angry...
break up to make up.
Yeah, the angry stuff is...
it's
pretty spicy.
We're like, we're not mad no more.
Yeah.
That was
or I'm a little bit mad at you.
Right. But
just enough to bring out aggression.
Enough of a compromise to we ain't got to, they say don't go to bed angry.
Right.
We're going to go to bed and do something.
Right. There we go. The benefits of compromise.
That's a big benefit of compromise. Let me just say that. I'm not going to say collaboration. That's not the part of it, because it takes a while to collaborate. I feel like you get that benefit when you compromise.
Yeah, but you know what? Collaboration is kind of, Safehouse is kind of a great example of collaboration.
That's true.
We kind of throw some ideas in the bucket.
Right.
And it's not that we're tied to a specific idea. We have standards, right? One of my standards is I want to make sure content is sort of laid out a certain way,
that's
right?
his thing.
But at the end of the day, the content that comes out is a result of the combined ideas.
Right.
So I don't necessarily walk into it with an idea of we should talk about this, or you don't walk into it, well, you should talk about this. It's like, well, this is what's been on my mind. This is what's been on your mind.
Right.
What have you been praying about? What's God saying to you? All these things, kind of throw that into the bucket. And then what emerges is sort of this topic area or content arena or things that we can then flush out.
Because, too, I mean, outside of, I feel like you already kind of summed up the collaboration piece, too. I just want to add another one to that, is prayer.
Yes, yeah.
You have to be able to pray about whatever resolution you're trying to come to. And sometimes that could mean, okay, we're going to pray by ourselves. But the most powerful way to really resolve conflict, whether you're in relationships, especially when you're in a relationship with your forever person, and when you're married, is to pray together. Because in that prayer, now you hear out loud what it is that you're asking God to do. Because if we're incapable of coming to a resolution, and I may not always know the right resolution, that to me is the truth too. It's like I have to be able to acknowledge that, you know what, I don't even know how we're even going to resolve this. And so the only way for us to really resolve it is really to give it to God.
Yeah.
And to say, okay, God, neither one of us know how to resolve it, because some conflicts are just that tough.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, it like can tear a family apart. And so when you have those levels of conflicts, you have to be able to pray together. And also to be able to part of that collaboration piece. So I guess prayer is collaboration because you're talking to God about it. I mean, let's not collaborate with just each other. Yeah. Let's make sure that we got God in the equation. But also sometimes that level of collaboration, depending on the type of conflict that you have to pull other people in. It might be a counselor, it might be your pastor, or you just might have to get like I said, if you're married, marital counseling, because it's at that level of a conflict where we're at such an impasse that this thing could make or break us.
Right. We can't see the forest for the trees.
Right.
We're so
Absolutely.
deep into this thing, that we can't see the bigger picture. And sometimes it takes a trusted, spiritually sound third party to intervene and provide perspective. They're not necessarily going to come in and solve your problem, but they can provide a level playing field and a perspective and maybe even some experience on that issue. And one point I'd like to bring up, and this is something I'd like people to put in practice. So this is going to be very hard, right? But you mentioned prayer together. If you're in conflict, one of the hardest things to do is pray for the person you're in conflict with.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So I would challenge you that the next time you're in conflict, that you pray for the person you're in conflict with. And I'd say pray positive, affirming, and life-giving things, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's very easy to say, Lord, this person is crazy. Lord, fix their crazy mind in Jesus' name. Let his body parts not work
I've never
until he comes to his senses.
I've never said that.
Right. Because people get to praying some crazy stuff, right?
Right.
James says you don't get what you ask for because you pray amiss. Don't pray amiss. Right. Okay?
Right.
You ask amiss, right?
Right?
Do not ask amiss on this, right? What you want to do is, especially with your forever person.
Because if it starts to happen, then you're going to be mad.
Right. You're going to be mad, right? Now their body parts don't work and you need them, right?
Don't do it.
Don't do that, right? But all jokes aside, though, I mean, start to pray things like, I know this is the woman of God. I know this is the man of God. And you're giving them great ideas and you're giving them great perspectives and you're giving them passion and you're giving them a point of view. And their desire is for the best for us.
Yeah.
It's that type of language. One, it's for your soul, so that you can remind yourself. It's like David, remind you of who this person is in your life, right? Two, takes your focus off of what you think about them and refocus on the purpose behind resolving this conflict.
Yeah.
We need to resolve this conflict so that we'll have a better credit situation, so that we'll have a better home situation, that we'll trust each other more. These things, right? But, so when you're in conflict, once again, pray together, But I challenge you, and I'd even challenge you to do it in front of the person if you can. Pray positive things, life-giving things, affirming things about that person.
Because I think what was very powerful about that is that when the person hears it, it becomes prophetic in their ears. And that's the kind of stuff that will soften a person's heart. Remember our scripture, a soft word will turn away wrath. So when I hear you saying these positive things about me, then now my heart posture is different, and it is more open for us to get to this place of compromise and collaboration. Because at first, while I started out with the battle of wills, or I don't want to talk about it anymore, I'm done, let's just do it your way or whatever. But when I hear you say those things, or when you hear me say those things about you, it automatically shifts how now we both feel about it, because it's almost impossible. To me, it's always impossible to stay the same way when you invite God into any space that you're in.
Yeah.
So to me, that's one of the best conflict resolution approaches. You just can't even approach conflict without inviting God into it.
Yeah. If you start it out, I think you'll set the framework for things to not go off the rails.
Yeah.
But if things do start to go off the rails, finding your way back through prayer, and specifically positive, affirming, and life-giving prayer for the person you're in conflict with, may help to bring things back to center, even if they don't receive it at the time. When people are mad, it's like, oh, they just praying this stuff because they want something. That you expect when people are in that evil or in that sort of angry mode, they don't hear with the right ear. But it's still falling on good ground.
Absolutely.
And that thing could take root at any point.
Yeah.
And
that helps even when you're dating.
Yeah.
Too. Because when you know that this is the one who God has put you with, conflicts are still going to arise. I remember, what was it, like 2 weeks before our wedding? And then somebody came to me and said some crazy stuff. And I remember before I had even brought it to you, I prayed. I was like, okay, God, this is like the worst possible time for this level of a conflict to come up. Because this level of conflict we getting ready to get married in 2 weeks. I need to know, what's real and what's not real. And so the Holy Spirit was like, it's not true. Just don't worry about it. And so I remember when I brought it up to you, you were probably more mad about it than I was, because I was like, well, Holy Spirit already said it's not true. You ain't got to prove it to me. I'm like, at that point, I felt there was no conflict.
Right.
But the point I'm bringing up is that we were together. We weren't married yet, but that thing, had I let it and had not even asked God about it, just first came to you.
Right.
Whatever, that we might not even be sitting here.
That's true.
At this point,
That's
because
true.
that was the level of the accusation. So we might not even have been sitting here if I had handled it in a different manner.
Yeah.
Because it was a conflict.
Yeah.
So like you said, that's why I'm saying that when you're dating, and what God is saying to you, you got to, when you and your person, you're the one you're getting ready to marry to or whatever, when conflicts arise, you still got to go to God.
You do. It is. It's important. And it's one of these things where you really have to step back. And this is where we take on the Christian worldview, because this is not the world's way of resolving conflict.
That is true.
This is not, once again, the world is about winning. The world is about dominance. The world is about getting my point across. The world is about, I need to be heard and understood, where we really understand that this whole marriage thing is a mission and a mandate from God.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that at the end of the day, we have to figure out how to stay on mission. Right? We have to stay on task. So we resolve this so that we do not break the direction, or we don't cause a premature interruption to what God is doing through our relationship, because that's what's really at stake.
Yeah.
Not just your happiness, not just you getting your way. Whatever God has designed for you as a unit now becomes postponed.
Yeah.
Which
the battle of wills never involves spirituality.
Yeah.
It's even, like I say, even with me using the spirituality piece, that wasn't spiritual.
Right.
Okay. So that was still just me just trying to be manipulative and still just trying to get my way. I wasn't trying to get God's way. I was really just trying to get my way.
And there's many tools in the toolkit about getting your way. And then just take a couple minutes here, talk about some of those ways. So you see people use what they call ad hominem attacks, right? So if we're arguing about something, rather than me dealing with the topic, I'd be like, well, that's why people like you always think like that. Right. People from your background always think like that. You was raised on that part of time. So now I've shifted the discussion from what we're in conflict about to say, okay, you're not credible because you're this color, this size, you have this way of thinking, went to this school. I've now attacked a person. And people use that as a way to resolve. They also do things like move the goalposts. Right.
Oh, yeah. Expectations.
Move the goalposts. It's like, so we're arguing about this. And if I sense I'm not getting a victory, I sense, then I'll just change the whole nature of the argument.
Yeah.
I'll change the whole nature of the discussion. Right. It's like, whoa, we still haven't fixed conflict one. And now
now we got three
now
more.
we got this,
Yeah, that is true.
That's an emotional response to feeling caged in, boxed in, or in a corner. Like when a cat's in a corner, they just start scratching. That's one of those things. And none of these things, while they're not resolution approaches, these are things that people do to sort of get the upper hand or sort of get out of the corner in conflict, which really doesn't have the positive effect that they think it's supposed to have. In fact, it further worsens conflict, in my opinion.
Oh, no, I agree with you. Like it really does. Because once again, nothing is solved.
Yeah.
It's like, and then what happens is we keep wondering why we keep winding up in the same space all the time. And it's because we haven't solved anything.
Yeah. So what say you out there? We've talked about all of these ways that people choose to resolve conflict. Some positive, some negative, some in between.
We've tried them all.
Yeah, we've got experience.
Right, we got experience
with
in
them
all of them.
Right, and there's probably several more on the list.
Exactly.
That are not written down.
Right.
So if you have a few that you have seen or witnessed, feel free to share those in the comments or to our email, safeinthehouse@gmail.com. You can also DM us on both Facebook and Instagram at Safe in the House. Send us your comments and your information or your questions. We really like to dig into the discussion of this topic because conflict is one of these things that just runs deep.
It does.
And we get a lot of training about conflict in our upbringing, and we never know how that conflict training affects how we handle conflict today until we get into it.
Yeah. And it's the one thing you cannot avoid in any kind of relationship. Yeah. I don't care what kind of relationship you have. You cannot avoid conflict.
Yeah.
You can't.
You can't avoid it.
That's why this is such an important conversation, because you can't avoid it.
And most of all, we want to make sure that people have tools to bring healthy resolutions to conflict. That you have a tool in the toolkit to say, when we get in conflict, this is how we'll walk through it. And we're not going to mysticize it, and we're not going to pray the conflict away just magically. No, we got to work through it, right? Prayer is a part of it.
It is a part of it.
But we've watched people just sort of haba ba shiba, and and they still in conflict. The one just gave in. But the conflict is still there, So no, we have to really work through these things, partnering with God, praying for your spouse, all of those things.
That's probably the best thing I heard was, like you said, letting your spouse hear.
Yeah.
All the positive things that you're bringing before the Father in regard to your forever person. That to me is the deal breaker.
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah.
All right, y'all. That's all we got for this episode.
That's all we got.
Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Please send us your comments. We need some feedback. There she goes with the dance.
I had to get my little dance in.
Remember to ring the bell.
Yeah,
remember to ring the bell so that you get notified. We love you, everybody.
We love you guys.
Peace.